is. They are over there kaput, and we are here live to talk about it. I'm Tom Petrini. That's Evan Klosky. And yeah, so if you're watching this now inconsequential Spurs game, you see a starting lineup with Dejounte, and then Keldon Johnson and Luka Šamanić are in there. So Spurs, I guess, got the news before tip. Game didn't mean anything, and they're leaning all the way now into the development and
we saw Luka Šamanić get his first NBA points. So, huzzah! Big moment for tall Luka.
Right, go tall Luka. Proud of him.
He needed to get some points in. I think that might spark something.
Yeah, he needed that. And I'm glad to get to see him play in this game at least, which I don't know about you, but I have up in the corner of my screen. But let's talk about it, man. Spurs record playoff streak is now over. And it is a record, by the way. It's not like if they didn't make it this year, they wouldn't have the record. It is an NBA record, 22 consecutive years in the playoffs. Unfathomable when you think about it, when you try to put it into context. Me personally, I was in diapers watching Baby Einstein videos at that point in time in 1997. So
I might have been into Hey Arnold. Was SpongeBob still a thing? That might have been a few more years till SpongeBob. So
yeah, what did we do in that time?
I don't know, man.
I
can't
honestly,
remember
I'm going to Google that
for
right now because I know SpongeBob has had an insanely long run. And it's a good thing to compare this Spurs run because, like, what are other cultural institutions that have been around for 22 years? The Simpsons comes to mind.
Something like that. Big Brother's entering season 22 or 23, I think, right now as well. Survivor is like on season 30, I believe.
So SpongeBob premiered in 1999. So the Spurs playoff streak is older than SpongeBob.
Confirmed.
Yeah, we've got pre-SpongeBob and post-SpongeBob.
Oh, we got Dancing with the Stars. Okay.
Yeah, that's probably another one.
I don't even know I don't think Dancing with the Stars. You know what? As far as seasons go, they're able to bang out 2 in a year, so they kind of cheat a little bit.
But you guys, definitely get in the comments there. Tell us things as old as the playoffs, the Spurs playoff streaks. Want to see what you guys have to say there. Definitely a heavy day, though, in San Antonio. This is something that, we've known for months now that this is a very real possibility, even with the opportunity that they had here in this bubble. And they've played very, very well in the bubble. It just has wound up not being enough to get them into the playoffs after a season that was probably the worst season that they've had since 1997.
Yeah, this was something I think every Spurs fan was prepared for, but the fact that it's official now, it sort of just sinks in, and it's like, wow, it is finally over. I mean, here in San Antonio, Spurs playoffs and Fiesta run together, so maybe it's only fitting for the year that Fiesta doesn't happen is we don't have a Spurs playoffs run to go along with it because that would have been extremely weird. But beyond that, just it's a weird thing to kind of soak in there, but so many amazing moments flood into your mind when you think back into Spurs history. I'm seeing a bunch of people on Twitter kind of voice their favorite memories. Someone brought up, a game that they watched with their dad and their siblings. And, you have those personal moments. You can think back to the Memorial Day miracle. You can think back to the entire 2014 season. We can think back to the spectacular Detroit Pistons playoff series and the 7 games that when defense was a thing. So, all those moments kind of flood into your mind. And Greg Popovich right there for all of it. The 170 wins in the playoffs, those are the same amount that Pop has in his career. Obviously, the playoff run and Popovich run side by side. And then some other numbers, just 7 Game 7s. The Spurs were 3-4 in those, and most recently took a couple of L's when you think back to the Nuggets and the Clippers. Overall, a 170 and 114 record. They were bounced out of the first round only 6 times. So at a 22-year playoff streak, just 6 times did the Spurs not advance to the conference semifinals. Then they were bounced 6 times out of the conference semifinals. They were in the conference finals a total of 9 times, eliminated 3 times from the conference finals, of course, made 6 NBA finals, and were 5-1 in the NBA finals with 5 glorious championships towards the city of San Antonio. So it's mind-boggling when you put all those numbers together and what they accomplished, and it's just weird to talk about.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that has been a reality as reliable as death and taxes for the last 2 decades in the NBA, that you would see the Spurs in the playoffs. We'll do a little game here, guys. The Spurs do not have sole possession of the record NBA playoff streak. They're tied with one other team at 22 years. If you can name the 2 names of that team in the comments, both names, without peeking at the article that we put out today, I'll be impressed. And as you can guess by that, the streak lasted from 1950 to 1971. So I would argue that 22 straight years in the playoffs in this century is slightly more impressive. It was the Philadelphia 76ers, who were previously the Syracuse Nationals. Anytime you bring up the Syracuse Nationals and Wilt Chamberlain, I stop caring about records. That's just my personal thoughts on that. I mean, you can't compare them. It's like a Model T versus any car made today. It's completely different.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. What were your thoughts? I think just watching today, I was hoping to see some sort of like hope that Memphis and Phoenix would have some sort of fight like in their games, but Dallas and Milwaukee really just, at least Milwaukee made it to halftime down 10. So there was like, okay, maybe this could be a game, but I mean, it was just pretty pathetic efforts all around. Like, man, you're not even going to try. You're not even going to try.
It was tough to watch with any semblance of hope. I'm sitting there, I've got the 2 screens up, and I'm like, listen, I've seen teams blow 20-point leads in the last 5 minutes. I've seen that happen. So, I'm one of those people who, I don't want to start writing that Spurs playoff streak ends story until it actually happens. I got like 10 minutes on it today, just because it was so obvious that it was going to happen. But I saw somebody in the comments ask what we're drinking. Get your favorite cup from the AT&T Center, put something in it. I'm drinking Earth Juice right now. That's sweet water. But whatever you guys do at home is your business. Probably
a nice IPA and maybe a Truly tonight. We'll see what happens. Ooh. We'll see where the night takes us.
I had a thing where Jess and I went to the water the other day, and I got a Truly and she got a beer, and the cashier asked us which was for who, and I was like, I'm getting the Truly because we're going to be out on the water, and I would rather have a warm seltzer than a warm beer.
I will. So, I'll say it. Trulies are absolutely delicious. They are. Yeah. They're refreshing, and on a warm summer day, especially in the city of San Antonio, just my preference in the summer. I'll say it.
The Big Fun Pod unofficially sponsored by. We'll figure that out later. But
We'll make a battle between
we
Truly and White
digress.
Claw. Whoever hooks us up.
We digress. Whatever you guys are doing to dull the pain of this loss, we're all together in this shared experience, and I'm glad to be hanging out with all of you. With this season now pretty much officially done for San Antonio, we'll see what happens in this last game here, and we'll cut into this with any updates that are necessary for you guys. But with this season pretty much done, I think we can start talking about post-mortem and what happened not just in the bubble, but in this season overall.
Yes.
I'm ready for that conversation if you are.
Absolutely. And I'll just jump right into it because I think there is going to be a very fair criticism on not altering lineups during the regular season. I see a lot of things like, okay, well, the Spurs should have handed the keys to the car to Lonnie, Murray, White, and Keldon, and all these things. And I understand that because we're in the bubble and you're taking a look at some finished products throughout a year of workout. I'm still a firm believer in the Spurs developmental system, starting in Austin and making sure players are okay and are getting adjusted to the game fairly and not getting thrusted into roles where there's a lot of pressure on them right out of the gates. So, I think that Keldon probably deserved to come up sooner than he did. But to act like Keldon should have been there day one, I don't believe in that sort of thinking because I believe the development down in the G League and what they do there matters. And I think that's what makes the Spurs the Spurs. And, but I do agree that I think the lack of creativity in the starting lineups, especially leaving Bryn out there starting all the time. And, that's not to bash on Bryn like fans will, but Bryn is in that starting lineup. And what, DeMar and LaMarcus and you had either, DJ or Derrick. You didn't have both. It was just, Bryn just didn't fit into that mold, especially defensively. And I think, Bryn's just a one-dimensional player, as you mentioned, who has a role probably in, coming off the bench and against certain matchups. And I really do wonder if our opinions of Bryn would be framed a bit differently if he started the season off the way he was kind of finishing the regular season, because if we do remember, he did get his three-point percentage pretty much all the way back up to what it was the previous season. But he just started off so horrendously that it framed our minds into like, wow, Bryn needs to get off the court. But I will say just my number one overall take is I do think it is fair criticism to say that they did not play Dejounte and Derrick together after the first, whatever the first month or two, whatever you wanted to adjust Dejounte into his, after his torn ACL and everything. But not tinkering that starting lineup is something that is going to be a regret of San Antonio's this season, I think.
Yeah, I agree completely. And I think that, I know that there are 50 people hanging out in here right now. And of those 50, if I know them the way I think I do, I'm sure you guys have had some lineup suggestions that in this bubble you've seen Pop implement. And I've been working my sources and trying to figure out if he made a burner account and came on here and just caught up on Spurs Twitter from like November. But yeah, you could almost argue that there's been addition by subtraction here in the bubble with Bryn and Patty not playing. And, obviously, Patty, you have the leadership. Patty, you have the leadership. Both of them, you have the outside shooting. But they don't bring too much else in terms of basketball, in terms of winning, in terms of versatility. And in that regard, I think Patty is the superior player.
Yeah, and just to interject quickly before you go into your next point, Patty, I think was one of the like his play this season and the metrics, if you were to look at any of those sort of things, Patty's play was tremendous. And what he did in that second unit and whenever he was on the court, he was an unsung hero. And it looks like Quindary Weatherspoon is hurt in this game against the Jazz.
Yeah, he's limping.
He was driving, and it looks like he twisted his knee.
Yeah.
So Quindary is coming off the court, hobbling, and I'm assuming that is going to be the last we see of Quindary today. There's no point in reason. But yeah, so Patty Mills certainly still has value. Totally.
Absolutely agree. And you know, the thing with Patty taking a back seat in this bubble was, like, I mean, such a selfless, understanding thing. He's said multiple times, like, we understand that this is a development period. Even when the race got close, you know, it was like, okay, now the guys can play in crunch time. And the thing is, with when you take those guys out of the rotation, and then you have to fill those guard spots with Derrick White, Dejounte, Lonnie. You mentioned it when we recorded the last podcast together. The Spurs look way better on defense when DeMar DeRozan is the fifth best defender and not the wing stopper.
And we'll get into the whole should the Spurs, extend DeMar conversation at some point.
That's later in the show. We're getting to that a little later on.
And we'll also address. I saw someone comment about LaMarcus Aldridge. We'll also talk about that as well.
Yeah. But there's a lot to pour over. Before we talk about what happens next season, we've got to do a full post-mortem of this season. There will be plenty of time for us to talk about what happens next year. Draft lottery is coming up. And Evan, you said yesterday that there's going to be one more media availability. Pop's going to talk after this game and then potentially one more time.
If they do what they normally do in a typical season, we should get Popovich for one more press conference at some point next week. That's nothing certain, but if they operate normally and how they usually do this, then there should be one more availability with Popovich beyond what we get in the post game.
Right. So we'll hear from Pop again, and we can talk later about what we should ask Pop, what you guys want us to ask Pop. I don't ask all of the questions because sometimes you guys are dumb and sometimes you guys are mean. I love you all, but sometimes you give very good suggestions on what we can ask, and I actually have used some of those suggestions. So drop them in here, and if we see some good ones, we might ask them. But Evan, if you don't mind, I would like to go player by player for the Spurs for this season, and we can talk about how they did overall, how they did compared to what we expected them to do, and what role we expect for them on the team next year. Does that sound good?
Yeah, love it.
All right, cool. So I'm just going to go on the NBA's stats website here, pull up the players. Oh, do you want to start with Bryn Forbes? He's the guy at the top of the list.
Yeah, read them off.
All right, let's do it. Bryn Forbes will finish the year, shot 41.7% from the floor, 38.8% from three on 6 attempts per game. He graded out as one of, Evan is gone. Evan will be back. But I'll continue going through the stats here for Bryn Forbes for you good people. He shot 39% on 6 threes a game. He started how many games? He played 63 games. I'm guessing he started all 63 of them. Hey, Evan, you're back. How you doing, buddy?
I'm back. My screen totally just went turned off. But yeah, continue.
All good. I didn't get much further. As
Okay.
far as defensive stats go, Michael, I'll do my best to find them. There are some advanced stats that
I'll
have
say
him
this
as
off the
one of
top
the
of my
worst
head.
defenders in the league.
Yeah, off the top of my head, advanced metrics will show you he is one of the worst defenders in the league at his role. Yeah, it's bad.
Yeah.
I don't know what kind of numbers we're going to bring in there, but I have seen some stuff, and it's not pretty.
Yeah. So 538 has a rating called Draymond. That's an acronym. I wonder how hard they had to work to get that in there. But when he's on the court, opponents score 116 points per 100 possessions, worst mark on the team. And yeah, just okay. Here's his Draymond. Said he was the worst on the Spurs and 20th worst in the league. And he's just not a good wing defender. He's undersized. He is somebody who gets beat, who falls asleep, who doesn't really compete as much on that end of the floor. And, that's the thing with Patty. He's my height, but he fights every single possession on both ends of the floor. And that's something that Bryn has not brought to the team really at all, but especially not in the starting lineup. He's in there to shoot, and that's pretty much it. And I think we've seen in this bubble with Bryn out, which I don't know how much of that is he isn't healthy, and I don't know how much of it is, him knowing that he's not going to get much run, and he just wants to stay fresh for next year. I don't know.
Yeah, I would argue that. I mean, Pop says he has an injury. I guess he got an injury.
Right.
I mean, there was no indication. I mean, with that's the thing. At least Pop was kind of like, "Hey, I'm not playing Patty. That's just a me call."
Right.
And if it was, yeah. So I can't imagine they brought Bryn there to just kind of, "Hey, man,
the
just sit on the bench."
The reason that that's a thought in my head is he came to the bubble. He was a little dinged up already, maybe, and then he got a little bit more dinged up. Not to the point where he can't play, but to the point where Pop says to him, like he's said to guys in the past, your future's more important than this, so I'm going to hold you out. And, especially if it's not that serious, it would be better for him to just, be out with an injury for his upcoming free agency.
Yeah.
But so what do we think for Bryn Forbes' role for next season? Is he even on this team?
So, okay. Here's the thing about Bryn Forbes, usually, is that in his development, every season he was getting progressively better.
Right.
This year he went south a bit. As you mentioned, he took one more three-pointer this season, and in doing so, he went from 42.6 beyond the arc to 38.8 beyond the arc. So, 38.8 is nothing to sneeze about, and I'm pretty sure in one of those late months, you can fact check me, he did shoot around 40 or so percent. Was it in like January or something? January, February? So, he was regressing to the mean positively after a really, really rough start to the season. As tall Luka hit a three-pointer, watch out, it's happening.
Ooh.
But
is it too late?
So
do you think Silver can see this and say, "Oh, we need to see this guy in the bubble"?
I guess my final take on Bryn is I think for cheap I would bring him back and I would not use him more than like 10 minutes a game, 10 to 12 minutes, and I might not even play him most nights, or some nights. Right. It's matchup based. I mean, there are some games where you can use him as a perimeter shooter. Like, to me, I view him again, we're moving to the time where Popovich talked about perimeter players versus thinking of things in a 1, a 2, a 3. And if you're going to make him one of the perimeter players, you need to surround him with good defensive players,
Right.
which I think my problem is with Bryn is that he's pretty much a weaker Patty Mills. So
Right.
it's like you can't play Bryn and Patty together. So
Exactly.
so if you're going to do that, that's going to be a problem, which means that you probably need Bryn as a backup for A, an injury to one of your shooters, or B, if Patty ever gets in foul trouble, you can put Bryn out there and you lose a little bit on defense, but, he can shoot the ball and you're losing nothing offensively from that perspective.
I
So,
saw a comment I loved from Mary Jo that said that, Bryn is a weaker Patty. And also Patty has championship experience and all of that intangible leadership amazingness that makes him Patty Mills. He's one of those guys who should have his jersey retired in the AT&T Center one day. Bryn Forbes, I don't think is ever going to be that.
no, and that's my thing.
I don't think like he's a good enough shooter that he can go to some other team in the league and be like the ninth guy, the shooter that comes off the bench, the JJ Redick type guy who shouldn't start because defensively it doesn't work, but still can make meaningful contributions to a winning basketball team. I just don't think that's the Spurs.
Yeah, with how the Spurs look, I totally agree with you, and I think he does have value for
Right.
a lot of teams, who need that shooter. I mean, essentially, if you were to think about it this year, if you remove, and we'll get to Marco, but if you remove Marco from the equation, Bryn would fill what Marco did this year, and we got to talk about decreasing that specific role, but that's sort of the way that I kind of view it.
Right.
So
yeah, and it's not Bryn's fault that another three for
another tall
Luka.
Luka three.
It's
Tom. It is
what's
happening.
Up? I'm crying on the inside, but right now I'm happy because development. But it's not Bryn's fault. Oh yeah, go ahead.
Very quickly. Bryn, and I think what we can argue was a pretty disappointing season, was still a top 50 3-point shooter in the NBA, percentage-wise, that is.
Yeah.
So there's something to be said about that. You look at a team like Houston, who, he certainly doesn't have the ISO abilities that I think the Rockets are looking for with their small ball stuff. But if you're looking to a team like devoted to 3-point shooting, he is going to be someone that you might be interested in. The Kings, I mean, it's all a matter of how much money he can make in the open market, because for cheap, I want Bryn back on a 1-year deal. But if he can make some money, then just let him go.
Yeah, honestly, I don't want the Spurs to re-sign Bryn on a deal comparable to what he could attain on the open market, both in terms of money and in terms of role.
Mm-hmm.
And I think because of that, I'm fine with him going to some other team. One thing that I have seen a lot of watching other teams play in the bubble, they're shooting a lot of threes now.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of nuts how many threes and how good these guys are at shooting threes. So Bryn Forbes can find a home somewhere in the NBA. I would just prefer that it was not in San Antonio. All right, moving on. Who should we talk about next? We shouldn't do all of the starting lineup at once. Let's go to let's go the opposite direction. 15th guy on the bench, Chimezie Metu. We didn't see much at all from him this year. He played in 17 games, averaged under 5 minutes in those games. This is his second year in the NBA, and the Spurs drafted him to be a explosive athlete, rim runner. His game kind of at the NBA level will depend on his ability to develop an outside shot. We got tall Luka on Donovan Mitchell, and tall Luka shut him down. That was fun to watch. Uh, but Chimezie, we really haven't seen too much development from him.
Yeah,
I haven't, at least.
here's my problem with the Spurs is that they kind of have a bunch of players. They have redundant players, right? So when I
Yeah,
think of Metu, I think of Eubanks. I
yeah.
mean, they're just
Who are
they're just
both
sort
on
of
the
the
court at the
same.
same
Like
time right now, by the way.
when you think of Bryn, you think of Marco and Patty. Like you just like
Yes.
it's just like okay, like I'm cool with Metu and I'm cool with Eubanks, but I don't think having both of them makes any sense.
Right. And when it
Have one
comes
of
to
them.
redundant players, you can be redundant on the wings. And teams that are good are redundant on the wings. Look at the Bucks and the
Correct.
Raptors and the Celtics and any other team that's playing well in the NBA right now is probably loaded up with talent, between the shooting guard and the forward positions. But the redundancy becomes an issue when those players have limited skill sets or abilities, and it becomes an issue where if you have to get all those guys minutes and time, your team isn't going to be operating at peak efficiency because, as we've seen in this bubble, you can do way more with 5 versatile players than you can with pretty much any other combination of players in the NBA. And I think Eubanks, we can go into him next.
And
he's been really impressive in the bubble.
He has been, and just some thoughts on Metu, and I'm gonna have similar thoughts on Eubanks because this has always been my thing, and even though Metu just missed a 3-pointer, but we've seen Metu shoot from the perimeter in Austin. Haven't really seen it much in San Antonio. Obviously, When he's on the court in San Antonio, he's probably the 5th offensive option, which is totally fine. But then defensively speaking, he's supposed to be a rim protector. He's not built like Montrezl Harrell. He's not even built like Drew Eubanks. So he's going to get you some blocks here and there. But does he have the ability to really defend the paint the way that he needs to defend the paint? And I just don't know that answer. I just don't. I mean, at least with Drew, we're seeing in the bubble that he can do his part. I think Drew is a little bit too soft in guarding the perimeter, which is not good in today's basketball game, in the modern NBA. So I don't know how Metu fits the equation. And I think the Spurs this offseason need to choose between Metu and Eubanks and keep one of them, and the others got to go. I mean, I think the Spurs have a team option for next year at $1.6 million. So if they want Metu, it's a pretty simple thing to pick up the option. Metu seemed like he was put in the doghouse at the end of the year, or they just wanted him to develop down in Austin without sniffing the NBA. It's just a confusing situation. And then if we want to just do you have any more thoughts on Metu?
I mean, I think he's definitely an explosive athlete, but I've wanted to see more from him than just that since he was drafted. And he has developed that outside game a little bit, but for whatever reason, I'll tell you the reason. In the brief time that he got on the floor, he didn't look good at the NBA level. And Drew Eubanks is not as explosive an athlete, although he did almost murder that Antetokounmpo brother with a dunk. But he's not that explosive above the rim athlete that Metu is. But Drew has kind of been the guy that, despite his size disadvantage, he's still plenty springy.
Yeah. Drew is a freak athlete, by the way. I mean, he is. He's always been, even if you go back to his days at Oregon State. He is.
He jumps.
I mean,
he gets, and we can talk about Poeltl soon, but he finishes stronger at the rim than Jakob Poeltl, who has 3 inches on him. I'm pretty sure
Eubanks,
he's only
Poeltl can barely jump over the ace of spades. I mean,
Drew Eubanks is listed at 6'9", 245.
See, and that's my thing though. Think about it, 6'9". Think about all the 6'9" players who isn't like Ben Simmons like 6'8"?
Yeah.
And like, I mean, just for him, he's a 6'9" power forward who just in the modern NBA, I'm confused where that fits in because you have 6'9" players who shoot threes at such an unbelievable clip.
Right,
And
exactly.
uh,
He needs to develop an outside shot for me to
yeah,
be
like
a legitimate contributor in a NBA rotation.
like
You know, you want to hear something funny though? Jakob
yeah,
Poeltl, 7'1", so that's 4 inches taller, and allegedly, according to the NBA, the same weight, 245.
yeah. That's. I mean, Drew's built like a truck, and he's a
Yeah,
freak athlete. It's just, you know, I'm cool with bringing back Drew and having him play it, you know, as your third big. You know,
right,
if Poeltl and LaMarcus, one of them's I mean, Poeltl's going to. We got to talk about signing Poeltl again, but you know,
right.
inevitably speaking, if you do have Poeltl and LaMarcus and Trey, you know, someone's going to get in foul trouble there, and Drew might be able to sneak 5 to 8 minutes, and I think that's his role. I think he's someone who can
Right.
bring tons of energy. He'll get a block here and there. I think he can handle his own. I think he needs to do a little bit better on defensive rotations and understanding that stuff, which I think in the bubble we're seeing that he has been progressing nicely there. And, you know, if I had to choose between Drew and Metu, I'm going Drew.
Yeah, I'm with you there. Do you want to tackle Yak right now, or should we go into those other shooters on the bench first? Let's stick with Yak,
Let's go to Yak.
yeah. So Jakob Poeltl played in 65 games this year, averaged under 18 minutes, but obviously has been pressed into a bigger role here in the bubble with LaMarcus Aldridge out. I can pull up his bubble numbers in a minute here. But shot 62% from the floor in 4 attempts. He's not a guy who has a robust scoring repertoire. He's not going to get you a ton of points.
Poeltl is a guy that is the stat line's not going to impress you. That's not his value.
Right.
You know, like if he gets,
right.
I mean, like if he gets like a I don't know, 12 and 10, or, you know, 14 and 12, and that might, you know, he's supposed to be like a low double guy.
Right. Right. And his offense is going to mainly come on putbacks and rolls.
Yeah.
Exactly, Mary Jo. Low usage, high impact. You got it exactly right.
Yeah.
And his plus minus was really excellent in the bubble.
Well, so his and to piggyback off that, his offensive rating was 114. His defensive rating was about 109. I mean, he had a net rating of 5.8. So
right.
He had a net rating of 5.8 on a team that won 33 games.
Right.
I mean, he's got value. He has a positive impact on the court when he's there.
In the bubble, in 7 games, averaged a shade over 26 minutes a game, 8 points per game, 62% from the floor, 9 rebounds, 2 assists, a steal, and a little over a block per game. And when he was on the floor, average per game, the Spurs outscored their opponents by 9 points. Yes, I know he doesn't dunk, and he should. And his entire summer, honestly, should be like a Rocky IV training montage with him just like dunking the ball in a barn in Austria somewhere with Hearts on Fire in the background. Just like put up a thing of
You've really built out this image.
Yes. This is the drill I want him doing, okay? You take like plywood, like karate boards for kids, right? Like balsa wood maybe, whatever it is. You set it up so it's rigged so that that's in between him and the basket, and he has to go up strong with the ball and jump through it and then dunk the ball. If he spends the whole summer doing that, he will come back as Shaquille O'Neal.
I need an angry streak from him. I do.
Yeah.
But speaking of the bubble, by the way, so I mentioned his net rating for the season was a 5.8 positively. Mm-hmm. In the bubble, his net rating is a 15.5.
Yeah.
So, you know, and again, I mean, the stats aren't anything impressive, but he is, you know, we talked about Drew and Nezzy, you know, when Poeltl is on the court, good things happen for the Spurs, and it's because he's a tremendous rim protector. He's wonderful on pick and rolls. Him and Derrick White have such an amazing chemistry together.
Yep.
They had for quite some time. I don't know what it is with those two, but they run the pick and roll so beautifully.
And he and DeMar have been running the pick and roll together since Toronto. So there's a ton of chemistry built up. And with Derrick, Derrick is a fantastic pick and roll player in his own right. But B, they played together on that second unit so much throughout the year that they were able to develop their own chemistry between the two of them. But we've also seen Lonnie play pretty solid pick and roll with Yak. We've seen Dejounte Murray attack the rim and get to his little pull-up game at the elbows. At the end of the day, and I mean, Pop has said this, anybody with eyeballs and a brain who watches basketball has said this. He's a guy who sets good screens and makes good plays and does things for his teammates that make things easier for everybody. Lonnie just got a dunk that didn't count, but it was cool.
It was cool. The ball was moving too.
Anytime I can watch Lonnie jump, I'm fine with it.
And so Yak is going to be a free agent this offseason.
Yeah.
And it's a really, really, really tough call because, first off, I think Poeltl is a net positive, as we mentioned, for the Spurs. But on the other side of the coin, I think there are matchups where he is completely overpowering against other teams, and then I think there are matchups where he is overpowered. So I think there are certain games where when Yak goes up against somebody who can go toe-to-toe with him, he's just sort of – I mean, he does not look as good out there. So I think there are certain opponents where his skill set is certainly a great matchup, and then there are certain opponents where it's not a great matchup. So you have to understand that with Poeltl, throughout the course of the season, you're going to have some games where he is just not going to be one of the best decisions to put on the court. And as far as a deal, because of his net rating, because he's sort of an analytical darling to an extent of what his presence brings on the court, he's going to probably get a nice little deal. I said this early in the season when I was looking up kind of comparable contracts. I think Mason Plumlee got 5 years for $80 million. I mean, you're kind of probably looking at least 15 per for Yak a year. I mean, that's kind of what you're sniffing. So, for Jakob, he probably would love a 5-year deal. The cool thing to do now is the 3+1 deals. I don't think Yak really cares that much about that stuff. I think he'll take the long-term security and call it good. So, I think he definitely provides important value for the team, and I think he's a modern NBA rim protector. I think he's actually pretty adequate at guarding on the perimeter.
I'm glad you brought that up. I wanted to talk about that because that's something that we saw in this bubble. There were many times, this is like a basketball 101 thing that you would teach kids. If you run the pick and roll and they switch it so that the big man is guarding a guard out on the perimeter, you get everybody out of the way, you let the guard do his thing and get past the big guy. Jakob Poeltl has really good foot speed and footwork on the perimeter, and his anticipation is great. He's a very smart player and talented at guarding the wing. So I think that makes him a more viable center that can't shoot than other guys. Because a lot of those guys who are more interior players are kind of stiffs out on the perimeter. And Jakob Poeltl is not that. He doesn't have a three-point shot, but he can defend the three-point line pretty well against most people. So that's a thing that makes me more comfortable with the Spurs giving him a longer contract potentially. And, the fact that literally the main thing that they need to do with his development is remind him every single day that he's 7'1" and can extend his arms all the way and dunk the basketball. If they literally hire a coach to every single day remind him that, like 15 times, especially during the game, he could be very, very effective. Like he could. There are so many points that he left on the board this year, because he went up soft, and at the end of that Sixers game was one of them. So obviously it's bigger than just one game, one play.
I'm seeing a bunch of comments for Harry Giles, and I get it. I don't know why the Kings did not accept his fourth-year option. Just a classic Vlade Divac move. But
what do you think about the Spurs pursuing a player like that in free agency?
I mean, that's cool. I would love that, but just understand that a guy like Harry Giles is going to go to the highest bidder. So if San Antonio wants Harry Giles, you're going to have to overpay for him. So just understand that. And if you're cool with that and you want Harry Giles a lot, just know that you're probably going to pay him more than you want. And I'm cool. As I said, I don't think there's a wrong answer there. It's just a preference. But don't expect to get a deal with Harry Giles. You will be paying top dollar. And for a team like San Antonio, I think San Antonio's in the running. Quinndary Weatherspoon, left knee strain, will not return. So that's the update from the Spurs. But yeah, just understand I'm all for Harry Giles, but you know that you got to know that you have a chance with him if you're going to let Yak walk. So I think Yak's probably a more fiscally responsible move. I think Harry Giles is definitely more of a home run move, and kind of need to see how everything shapes out and what Harry Giles can make in the open market. And if you're only going to pay a little bit more for Giles than you would Yak, then give me Giles, for sure. If it's going to cost exponentially more, then maybe Yak is where you kind of get a little bit of a discount, and you try to work the cap elsewhere in the future. So that's a good kind of question of Yak or Giles, in a vacuum, without worrying about other things. I would go with Giles. But
Timmy coming back from retirement, that would be fun. Honestly, I bet Tim Duncan could come back, average a cool 15 and 10 a game, and kickbox somebody if it came to it. And he'd be shooting probably 40% from three.
And also somebody, I saw somebody ask Jeremy Grant's situation. He has a player option for $9.3 million. We don't know what the cap situation is going to be like next season and how the pandemic affects it. So
it's a mess, in short.
That's why I'm kind of really hesitant to talk anything about future contracts. I think you're going to see, that's why DeMar might opt in, by the end of things. But my guess is a lot of people will be opting in to see where the cap is changing. Maybe a guy like Jeremy Grant can still make more than that 9.3 though. So, he's an option as well. Certainly a position of need for San Antonio.
Right. All right. Yeah. I think we pretty much covered it. We're at halftime now in this Jazz game, and it's 61-50 Jazz. Next, let's talk about those other shooters off the bench. We can do it very quickly. Patty Mills, consummate leader and professional, one of San Antonio and Australia's favorite sons, Spur through and through, a valuable basketball player. He is a very complete basketball player. The only problem is he's 6 feet tall. Jake, I think you're right. I think he gets his number retired by San Antonio one day. Isaac, he has been holding the clipboard here in the Orlando bubble. So there could be a direct path to coaching, but he's still got buckets to get. He just turned 32? It was his birthday and he just turned 32. So he's a young guy.
They'd be shocked if the Spurs don't view Patty Mills as part of that organization after he's done playing. Now he's got some time. I mean, you say he's 32 years old, about 31, 32. So, I mean, the guy's probably got like another 4 years in him before we talk about retirement. But, I don't know if he's going to be a coach. He could be part of the front office for all I know in the future. But I have a feeling that Patty Mills isn't going anywhere when his playing days are over. And I think that's what this was all about in the bubble.
Right.
And again, net rating this season was in the positives. Not a ton of people we can talk about that, but he was tremendous this year, and he kind of started out the year as a monster. I mean, he was making he was FIBA Patty in October and November, and I don't know where the Spurs would have been without him. If you remember how bad November was as is.
They needed every bucket from him.
Yeah, but Patty certainly probably making more than he's worth, but again, Patty is going to make whatever he's got to make, and the Spurs are going to keep him and just mark down that roster spot in the future, because there's no way the Spurs are ever letting Patty Mills go.
Right. I think a good way to put it is he makes more than what his play earns, but he does so much more than what he does on the court, Yeah. So it's one of those deals that, I mean, he's signed, and they're not going to be trading Patty Mills, I don't think, for anything. And then Marco, not signed through next year, not good.
I don't see any way that Marco Bellinelli's back. Like 0.1. Like I would be.
I think right now, Spurs fans, we are watching the last game we will see from Marco Bellinelli in a Spurs uniform. Yeah, I think that's what's happening right now.
I would, if Marco comes back next year, then I will let Spurs fans take over my Twitter account and say whatever they got to say. I don't see it. There's just no way. There's just no way that I can see it.
Marco shot 38.6% from the floor, 37% from three throughout this year. He was a train wreck on defense. It was not pretty.
He fell off a cliff. I mean, like, that's the thing is, like, I think the Spurs were just waiting for his offensive numbers to regress to the mean, and they just never did.
Right.
So I commend them for being patient, but in the end, I think the bubble helped a little bit. He did have a net, he was a beneficiary of the Spurs having a very good second unit. So his net rating was essentially 2 positively, and his offensive rating has gone up to a 111. Honestly, the way that he's played in the bubble would have been great during the season. But his October and November was just so detrimental to the team. It was just unbelievable how much of a negative he was on the court.
I think my main takeaway from Marco's season is that even the best version of Marco Bellinelli, who is hitting those leaning 20-footers with his foot on the line, coming off a screen, black hole, taking shots with young guys out on the floor in garbage time, or for some reason during a critical game, he's not. He might be that end of the bench shooter for a team.
Yeah.
He's got some championship experience, obviously, but his production on the court, his defense makes him almost unplayable, in my opinion.
I'm sorry, but you don't have Marco Bellinelli in that role to get 6.2 points per game.
No.
You just don't.
No.
Last year, in 18-19, he had 10.5 points per game, Like he had an impact. He shot 41% from the field. He still shot his 37% from deep. He played that supplemental role, but he was effective in that supplemental role. It just, he was so horrific for so long offensively. It was so unlike him. And it just, when you can't do the one thing that you're supposed to do, then everything is exploited. At
right.
least with some other players, when you're shooting so well, it's like, well, we know his defense stinks, but look what he's doing offensively. You can't make a basket, and not to mention you do your leaners, it just,
his shot selection is fine if the shots are going in.
He's always done that,
but,
so that stuff just makes you crazy when it doesn't go in. But yeah, it just it's run its course. It just didn't work out this year.
Yeah.
I don't think he's as bad as this year was, but he's certainly aging, and it's time to. It's just redundancy, and players like him in the modern NBA who are one-dimensional, just like Bryn, they don't fare too well right now, and it's unfortunate.
But he
does work great off the ball. He does work great off the ball.
And I think the young guys especially, who we'll talk about in a minute, I think they've learned from watching him some very productive ways on how to move off the ball. Keldon does it innately very well. Lonnie has improved greatly in that area.
Mm-hmm.
But, yeah, I think there's almost a 0% chance we see Marco in San Antonio next year. There's a small chance, maybe not so small chance, that we see him on an NBA team, mainly for veteran leadership, sometimes for 10 minutes a game, some outside shooting.
Yeah, he might, if a team's like strapped in a salary cap, some of those teams that are very top heavy, they might, pack the bench with a guy like Marco who they can shove in there. And, he's got experience, and he's not going to, completely tank you if he plays the game he's supposed to play. So.
Or he could be in Europe. We don't know. Or China. I
can see him going back to Italy and maybe just, finishing his career out there. But
who would say no to that? Pop visits him and has some wine sometimes.
Call him Messina. Maybe Messina will take him back.
No, that's a good point. Even Powell found a place on the Bucks for a bit. And, I think the only minutes he played were that one game against the Spurs where Pop just revenge pick and rolled him to death. Like, this is for every time I had to watch you get roasted in pick and roll. So I don't think Marco is on this team. And love him, love Uncle Marco, but I know Spurs fans are ready to move on. I would guess that a smart front office is also. Let's talk about the young guys. I see we got some people in here. How's it going, everybody? Thank you to everybody who's been hanging out. We've been out of here for a minute, but it's been really cool.
Oh, Mary Jo wants Trey. We can go Trey.
Yeah. He is one of the young guys. Spurs picked him up after that disaster of letting Davis Bertans go and trying to get.
If we're doing the postseason mortem, man, that was not a good sign. By the way, when
the Damari Carroll thing.
Oh my god! I don't know what happened there.
So, Trey though had himself a pretty good season, especially down the stretch as he got more comfortable. Playing with his Spurs teammates and finding his spots and letting that three ball fly. Let me break it down by month here with the splits.
Yeah, I was literally just about to do that because the Trey we got towards the end of the season is the Trey that we're optimistic about.
All right, this is crazy. Okay, so October, 46% on a little over 3 field goal attempts per game. No made threes in those first 4 games in October. Fast forward to December and January. He's not shooting the ball well. He's below 40%, but he's at a little over 5 attempts per game. And shooting like under 20%, under 30% on his threes. So shots not falling, but he's shooting a little more. And then in 5 games in March, 11 shots per game, around 45% from the floor. And in February and March, he shot around 48% from 3 on a pretty high volume of attempts.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the trend is really positive there for Trey Lyles. I think both age-wise, position-wise, and skill set-wise, he fits really, really well with this young core that the Spurs are building. And I think he's a player that the Spurs should invest in long-term.
Look, they can bring him in for next season for $5.5 million. And I think you absolutely do that. That's a no-brainer.
Yeah.
And you see what you have. I'm not sure if I'm ready to commit anything beyond next season. I need to see that what he was doing in February and in March is going to be the Trey Lyles we're going to get. Because if he lives out there, then we can call him a perimeter player. And all of a sudden, Trey Lyles at 6'9", right? We brought up Eubanks' size. At 6'9", you have guys like Trey Lyles who can shoot 3-pointers and extend defenses and make the offense flow. And he just, not to mention he's a great rebounder. So not only are you getting a low usage 3-point shooter, but you're getting somebody who's also going to get you like 6 to 7 boards per game.
And yeah, Mary Jo, I agree. He is a pretty good passer. I saw somebody ask his age. He's 24, going to be 25 before the start of next season.
Yeah, I mean, he's already bounced around enough. Former first round pick out of Kentucky. There's some meat left on the bone to figure out Trey Lyles, and I think that is a guy where I don't know if you start him or not, but he's certainly part of the rotation in some degree when we factor in everybody, and he is a no-brainer. Scoop him up for 5.5, and I think in the end that was a nice move by Brian Wright and company in a crappy situation to bring him in. It took months for it to come to fruition with the way that we think Lyles needs to play. But with the version we have seen or last seen, we're happy with that. And that's going to get you a call back to San Antonio.
Agree 100%. Okay. Should we just close the door on the rookie class real quick, starting with the highest pick and the least impactful so far on the NBA level?
Luka?
Luka. Very quickly.
Look, there's not much to break down. All I'm going to say here is everybody has these grandiose takes about Luka Šamanić. I have been hammering this home forever. You know this. This is one of my I stand on my soapbox. He's a project, and until the year 2022, we don't really know what we're going to have with Luka Šamanić. I can say this in the minutes we have seen. I've seen a couple of good things today. He looks a little bit more comfortable, but the dude needs some confidence. I need him to bulk up. I need him to show energy. I need a lot more out of what I'm seeing in the opportunities that he's given. He is playing way too weak. I mean, you see Keldon is fearless. And actually, I was able to talk, and I'll mention with Keldon, I'll hold that off. But I did talk with John Calipari yesterday about Keldon Johnson.
Oh, nice.
And he's the one that told me that, he's a fearless player. That's what you see with Keldon. Like, you see the fear in Luka Šamanić's eyes when he steps on the court. So send him back down to Austin next year. Let's get him more confidence, and then halfway through the year, let's bring him up, and we need to trickle him in for some minutes. But again, Luka was a high-risk, high-reward pick in that situation where if he can pan out, his body and his type is exactly what the modern NBA needs. And it's exactly what San Antonio needs. And if Luka can pan out with he can handle the ball, he can rebound, he can shoot threes, he can do everything at what, 6'10"?
6'11", yeah.
6'11"?
Yeah.
I mean, if he can fill out, we're talking about like a potential sort of superstar talent. But
it could be a matchup nightmare.
Exactly, but he needs to develop. So
he's nowhere near ready. Yeah,
I'm not happy with the small opportunities that I've seen out of him. So, but I'm not ready to make any sort of take on Luka. He was never going to be part of this season. I never even put him in the picture for next season. So, still got some time on him.
Yeah. As far as meeting expectations, this is about what I expected from him for this year, so I don't care. I'm going to try to sum it up in as few words as possible. He's not ready yet. That's okay. He's young. We'll see. 10. And that is my Luka Šamanić take. And we can move on now to Quinndary Weatherspoon. who
Mm-hmm.
I think has looked really nice in the bubble. He's a skilled combo guard, does a little bit of everything, tenacious on defense, not afraid of contact. What have you seen out of him this year?
Yeah, I like Q. Certainly a guy that comes into the NBA with a lot more experience than most rookies. Played all 4 years there at Mississippi State. Was a bucket getter there. I think with a bit more rope, we can see a little bit more of his shooting potential. Obviously, when he steps on the court, he's not there to score points per se unless the shot is kind of open. He's probably the fifth
Right.
option, at best fourth option on the court to shoot the ball. But you just see poise. I think defensively he needs a little work. Sometimes can be. I've seen some great moments out of him defensively. I've seen some rookie moments out of him defensively in terms of rotations. But he seems like a very viable backup point guard for this team. And if you're going to play Dejounte and Derrick together in the future, you're going to need Q to come in to allow both of those guys to rest at some point near the end of maybe the first quarter, play a little bit at the beginning of the second quarter, and the end of the third quarter. In those 7 to 9 minutes or so, I think he can fulfill some sort of role.
Yeah, I agree completely. And I think he's got the physical tools to guard both guard positions. And he was a 4-year player, right? 2-year SEC All-Star.
Yes. Yep.
And so he's a guy who has a lot of experience playing the game of basketball, kind of similar to Derrick White in that sense, where, spent a lot of time in college, but was a really, really good college player for a reason. And that reason boils down to understanding the game and then having the physical tools to do what you need to do. And, again, as far as expectations go, I kind of expected him to be a little more NBA ready than Luka from day one, even though he was, the 50 whatever pick, and Luka was 19. I wasn't expecting him to get much run just because of the guard depth, but in the bubble he got an opportunity and he played pretty well. I liked what I saw from him. Should we go to Keldon now? Can we go to Keldon?
Oh, please.
Let's discuss. Let us discuss Keldon Johnson.
Keldon Johnson.
Do you want to start? You can start us off.
Man, this is just a tremendous pick. And again, I'll just tell you guys, I'm going to do a story on Keldon Johnson tomorrow, so I have a bit more of what to say on him. But when you just talk about a dude who plays the right way, he just has an infectious personality, and that's often on the court. Everyone talks about his smile. He's goofy. In the post-game press conferences on these Zoom calls, he's out there sneaking up behind people and waving to the camera, with his face all up in it as Keldon Johnson just gets an and-one bucket. Something that Calipari said, which was really interesting. He said, because I told him, I was like, man, for a guy his size, he uses his body so well. And I was like, we make jokes here, his big body, because it's something he said on the court. And he was like, that's exactly on. He said coming out of high school, he was an inconsistent shooter, and that was the big knock on him. But he said, his energy is just unbelievable. And the way that he plays, Calipari said, I knew that I would be able to find a role for him with that sort of tenacity. And he was like, at points, he played young. At some points, he's kind of doing things and he doesn't know what he's doing because he's allowing his energy to take over. And he said, that's just part of what you get with the Keldon Johnson experience. But that experience was amazing. And he said it was destiny for an organization like San Antonio to get him, where he said, admittedly, Keldon was disappointed that he dropped that far. And where Calipari admitted, saying, I had I could not believe that he dropped that far. He said there were 5 teams in the middle of the draft that Keldon did not work out for. So that when those 5 teams picked and did not pick him, other teams are out there saying, well, is there something that we don't know? And he said that had a slippery slope effect. And he said the Spurs were in the gym numerous times scouting their players, and that the Spurs texted Calipari during the draft saying, is there something we need to know? Like, why is Keldon Johnson here? And Calipari said, I do not know, man, but he is good to go. And that's why the Spurs pulled the trigger there when they did. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, so that was a nice little tidbit from him.
So they called him while they were on the clock.
They like texted him. There, yeah. One of the Spurs scouts texted him, was like, yeah, is there something that like we're missing? And Calipari's like, I don't know what's going on. You know, he's just like so confused. And he even said it during draft day, just you know, like him going to Spurs, like where Keldon might be disappointed he went that late. It's going to be fate that he went to the Spurs, because that is going to be such an unbelievable fit where they are going to demand excellence out of him and keep him sort of on the tracks, where this guy has so much energy that they're going to be able to harness some of that energy and make sure that he's dialed in to where he needs to be. And that's what we're seeing, man. And we're seeing Keldon make leaps earlier than he should, honestly, in his career. And
it's like when a baby starts walking at 3 months and you're like, whoa, chill out, man.
It's but I mean, the most obvious development has been his 3-point shooting in the bubble. It cannot, like, he is way too hot for his own.
I want to do the stats.
Dude, his 3-point percentage, I'm looking now, is like at 63% from 3.
All right, so in the bubble, in the last 7 games, last 7 games, he's got 11 points today. But in the last 7 games, 63% field goal, 26 minutes a game, 13 points a game, 71% on 2 threes a game, over 5 rebounds, over an assist, and a steal per game. And the plus-minus average has been plus 5.6. So he's another one of those guys who just, even if he doesn't light up the box score, he has an opportunity to make a huge impact on the game just with his hustle, his physical play. I think we've already seen enough from him this year to say that he deserves a big role next year.
Yeah.
I just saw a comment, Mary Jo, asking us, does he start next year?
I don't know.
What do you think about that?
So I don't know. I need to see who's on the roster, and I'm not saying that he doesn't deserve some starts. Like, at some point, I'm sure we're going to be saying, like, oh, maybe he should start. But I don't hate Keldon coming off the bench. I mean, we're talking about an organization that had Manu Ginobili as the consummate sixth man. Like, coming off the bench is not, like, a bad thing. You know, Keldon is certainly
Keldon's
somebody,
been finishing games here in the bubble,
I was
too.
just about to say that. I don't care if he comes off the bench, but I do know that I want him finishing games. That much I do know. So 100%. I really don't, I don't know how next year's lineup is going to look as far as starting and all that stuff, but it is very clear in the bubble that when we get down to crunch time, I want Keldon Johnson in the game. He is one of those players, right, that steps on the court and good things happen. Good things happen with Keldon. And one last thing on the Calipari conversation that I meant to bring up and I forgot. When I brought up the big body stuff, he said it's sort of the same Booker evolve into the player that he had. Like Devin Booker, if you look at his career at Kentucky, I think he averaged 10 points per game at Kentucky. And, I mean, he had, different sort of skill set, also a smaller body. But he was like, I watch Book now, and I'm seeing him, like, yamming on people with his left hand. And he's like, that's like, he's starting to fill out and use that body correctly. And it's like making him into one of the best players in the NBA. Now, I don't know if Keldon Johnson's going to be Devin Booker-esque. I would probably say, especially in the San Antonio organization, that's not going to happen. But Keldon has not yet filled out. And so if he's using his body so well now, imagine what he's going to do in 3 years when he packs on another 10 to 15 pounds of muscle.
Yeah. agree. First of all, I think he's taller than 6'5". He's listed at 6'5". I'm not buying it. I'm on
I'm
Team
not
Keldon.
buying it.
But yeah, his body control is fantastic, and he has the size and the competitiveness to really compete, really 1 through 4, on the defensive end of the floor, and he has that
Yep.
dog. He's very very defensive. I just to jump in here real quick. I just saw Luka look lackluster on a closeout to a corner three, and it looked like Pop called a timeout to yell at him. So that's fun. I've seen questions about Keldon's ceiling, and this is something that I've joked about, but not really joking. Like Derrick White is Clay with a handle. Keldon Johnson is Kawhi Leonard with a lovable personality and no meddling family members. That. I mean,
I don't know if he's got the Kawhi ceiling. Mostly because of size.
He's got at the very least 2014 Kawhi.
You know me. You know where I stand on.
You say Corey Maggette, I'm going to smack you.
Peak. Okay. Do I need to run through peak Corey Maggette for you? Like, people don't understand what peak Corey Maggette is. All right? Okay. Let me go to his 2007-2008 season.
Corey Maggette.
Look at his peak season.
We're talking about one of the most exciting rookies the Spurs have had in years. This guy's talking about
All
Corey
right,
Maggette.
Let me tell you 2007, 36 minutes per game. He averaged 14 shots per game. He shot 46% from the field, 38% from three. He averaged 22 points per game, roughly 3 turnovers. He had 1 steal per contest, 3 dimes, and 6 rebounds per game. And he went to the line almost 10 times per contest. That peak Corey Maggette is what I see as Keldon's future.
I think he could do that next year. I think if we're talking about ceiling for career, I hope the Spurs go on another 22-year playoff streak on Keldon Johnson alone. I hope he's still playing at that point.
I think
I'm high on Keldon Johnson. I'm a little high on Keldon Johnson.
No, I'm super high on Keldon Johnson. I don't necessarily think he's going to be an all-star, mostly because he does so many things very well. I don't see him doing one thing particularly great, but he is just going to be him and Derrick White are just going to be cornerstones as part of that a sort of a grit and grind-ish type of mentality that the Spurs might meld into, of just bringing tons of energy on the defensive side of the court. And, you just have a lot of energetic young players. Keldon missed a corner 3. Haven't seen that in a while.
Yeah, it's been a minute. His form looks so pure. I can't believe the ball would even consider not going in.
Yeah. I don't know what Chip has done with him. But obviously they've made it a point to shoot corner 3s, and he has been locked in. We all know the Spurs organization; they love that corner 3. So,
okay, these are Kawhi's 2014 regular season averages: 13 points, 1.7 steals, 0.8 blocks, 2 assists, 6 rebounds. He shot 58% from the floor and 38% from 3. And played 29 minutes a game. I think Keldon Johnson could do that next year.
Oh, totally. Yeah, no doubt. No doubt.
I don't know if he's Corey Maggette. I don't know if he's prime Corey Maggette next year, but he is at the very least 2014 Kawhi.
Yeah, I guess let me just say this. I also want to see how Keldon does when he fills into his body. He's still a kid. If you look at him and you look at his body, he's not even close to chiseled yet. He's just not.
He's still going to the pediatrician.
Luka 3.
He's a huge child. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I really like his footwork on those 3s. He's quite good for a big man at getting his feet set, stepping into those 3s.
Yeah. Defensively speaking, needs a lot of work.
Yeah. The thing is, he's 6'11", but overall he's a better perimeter player than he is interior.
Yeah.
So that's been a really interesting thing to watch. But yeah, Keldon is like smiley, lovable Kawhi to me. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know if he turns into Robo Kobe, but at the very least, the version of Kawhi that won Finals MVP. Yeah, I could see Keldon doing that.
Yeah, and
Like
I think
soon.
the number one thing from Keldon you got to see is just a little bit more of the mid-range game. We don't really see any of that from Keldon, right? He either drives or shoots threes. Now, in today's NBA, that's all you need to do. So I don't know.
Spurs don't need any more guys that love shooting mid-range shots.
Yeah, we'll leave that to Dejounte. That's his shot.
Right. And DeMar DeRozan, but we'll talk about him later.
Yeah.
So let's talk about some of the other members of the Spurs young core. Let's talk about Lonnie. Let's talk about Lonnie Walker. It was an arduous season for him, for sure.
Yeah.
I'm going to take a look at his month-by-month stats, but it really came down to opportunity and trust. And in the beginning of the year, you could argue that he hadn't really earned it. You could argue that he probably should have gotten an opportunity to make mistakes more at the NBA level a little earlier.
Mm-hmm.
He averaged 5 minutes a game in October and November, 16 minutes a game in December and January. Yeah. And he had this really short leash, Pop did, on Lonnie. And, having covered him in Austin and spent a lot of time around him, I know that he's one of those people who, his play is very based on confidence. And I know that he probably didn't get much confidence just based on the way his coaching staff was managing his minutes, at least, and yanking him out of games when he made a mistake. But as the season went on, he gradually earned more trust. And in the bubble, averaging about 26 minutes a game. And he's been shooting the ball quite well. He's around third. He's been okay shooting the ball. He's been
okay, but his last 2 to 3 games have done him no favors.
Right. He needs to be more consistent with that 3 ball. But at the very least, the biggest piece of growth for him, to me, was in the beginning of the season, he would catch at the arc, drive into a crowd, turn it over, not get the foul, and it didn't go great. And so in the bubble, we've seen him catch at the arc, and if he's wide open, he's letting it fly. And it's gotten down at a respectable clip. He definitely needs to be more reliable with it. But I trust him to put in the work to be more consistent in that area of his game. And the Houston game is probably the high point of the Spurs season, right? Or one of them.
Oh my God. Yeah. I mean, he single-handedly won that game for the Spurs.
And he did it you want to talk about drives and threes. He did not stop attacking in those spots. He finished the season at 39% from 3. So that's really good. That's above NBA average. I think NBA average is closer to 35. And he's going to finish the year averaging 6 points in 16 minutes a game. But again, a lot of that is just he was brought along slowly and played with a tight leash. So that's one of those things that happens. He needs to get better, in my opinion, at being present and aware on the defensive end. That's something that he struggled with throughout the year. Looked a little better in the bubble. Looked a little better when he wasn't sharing the court with a bunch of guys who can't play defense. But one of those things where, he can iron that part of his game out. And I think just finishing through contact, seeking contact, um, and when he gets to the cup, going up strong and either forcing the ref to make a call or going through guys. But his talent level. The other day, Pop was talking about his basketball IQ, which is quite high. And in the bubble, my favorite thing that he's been doing is moving really well without the ball. With it, without it, he's moving well on the court, setting his teammates up, playing well, spacing the floor, doing a little bit of everything that you need to do. So he's been really, really good.
I agree with a lot of things you said. By the way, just to piggyback, I think when you look at this season, I'm counting as his rookie year. Really, I wish that he would have gotten a little bit more time at the beginning of the season and have given that leash. Overall, very inconsistent. I think he made a big step a couple of nights ago or a couple of games ago when he had a pretty off shooting night and made an impact in the game through throwing assists. And I think that's a nice development, as you mentioned. But he vanishes sometimes in games. Like, that's just the number one thing with Lonnie is he is such an athletic freak. And there are some times where I just don't feel his presence out there. He needs to get a little bit better, as you mentioned, defensively. I need him a little bit better shooting, and I need him a lot bit better at finishing at the rim. With a guy and his, as a guy with his athleticism, finishing at the rim transforms his game because he can get to the cup so easily, but he just doesn't draw enough fouls, and he's trying to manipulate his body into so many different ways that he makes it so much harder for himself when he just has to go through people. And he's got to watch some Keldon Johnson tape on that.
Yeah.
Like he does. It's just he just needs, as you mentioned, he has to welcome the contact. And if he can do that and play a little bit slower, Greg Popovich just talked about that a lot of, he's so fast and he's so athletic that sometimes his little bit of what Dejounte Murray does too, where your body's moving quicker than your mind, and that in this league, that can be of a huge benefit of yours if you use it properly. So he just has to pick his spots a little bit better, and I'm hoping for a big growth in him next season because there have been overwhelming moments where I've been like, this guy's a dude, and then I've been underwhelmed at points too. So I need to see a little bit more from him next season, but I'm still very much on the Lonnie Walker train as far as his, projecting his future goes.
Yeah, no, I agree. He definitely needs to be more consistent. I think it was hard for him to be consistent given the inconsistent role throughout the season. But yeah, I mean, he's a guy who, just given his talent and that confidence and his competitiveness, he can be really, really good at the NBA level. So I know the Spurs expect a lot out of him. I know he expects a lot out of himself. And he should be in a Spurs uniform for a long, long time. I think his season was more of a learning experience, but a valuable one, and he'll be better for it moving forward. You brought up Dejounte Murray before. You want to talk about him next?
Yeah, very quickly with Dejounte. Defense, remarkable as always. I think he leads the league in deflections. I think we all just have to live with the fact that Dejounte is going to get uber aggressive sometimes on defense, and it's going to cost you at some points or points. But if that means he's going to make deflections and get easy 2 points the opposite direction, you have to welcome that sort of aggression. What he did against the Sixers was inexcusable, and that can never happen again. But besides that, I need him to be a bit more efficient in his shot selection. So I think he was shooting about 50% before the bubble. And even in the bubble, his shooting has been fine. He's been given the keys to the car to shoot more, which is great. But now you have to use that power efficiently. Don't just start shooting because you haven't put up shots in a while. Like his game is working elbow to elbow, finding that mid-range jumper. He's money on those mid-range jumpers. So just find your shot and put up a few threes when you have them, which he's done. And I think his offensive game has really gotten better. It's not perfect. I need him to slow down in transition. He also has the Lonnie Walker thing where he doesn't welcome contact. He's not a great finisher. So those sort of things have to improve. But I don't think he's an albatross offensively speaking, which is something that when he first came to the Spurs, we're like, okay, this guy can play defense, but is he going to be a viable offensive threat? I think he has a role offensively speaking now, and the Spurs just need to make sure to run plays that speak to his strengths and to tell Dejounte, hey, put up your shots when you want them, but don't do anything that's out of your role. Like, play your game. Play your game. Don't force it.
I've seen a lot of people talking about his passing in the comments, and definitely a point of concern. His decision-making, a point of concern. This year, he averaged 4 assists and a little under 2 turnovers a game, so that ratio isn't bad. But he's definitely better as a slasher and an off-ball scorer. His game as a 3-level scorer has really improved. The last year that he was healthy, where he played like 22 minutes a game and was second team all defense, he shot 27% from 3. This year, 38% from 3. It's less than 2 attempts per game, but the efficiency and the willingness to take that shot and the ability to knock it down at a clip that forces the defense to respect him out there, that opens up his game completely for the driving that he does, the slashing, the pulling up at the elbow type thing. Mm-hmm. But I think there's plenty of valid criticism about his abilities as a true point guard. And I think that makes the development of Derrick White that much more important. And Correct. We can kind of segue into that now.
Yep. And that's why playing with Derrick is so important as well. Not just defensively speaking that it's a great lineup, but it also allows Dejounte to play what we would normally think of as like a – I don't want to say he's a 2, but he's kind of like a 1.5. You're taking the ball a little bit out of his hands, but he's still going to be part of the offense, and he can run the pick and roll. He can do the things that a point guard traditionally does, but he doesn't have to always do it. And if you can minimize his amount of touches with running the point, I think you make him a bit more efficient, which is what you need.
Right. And, you know, when you have the game on the line, especially with these Spurs, you want the ball in DeMar's hands. But, you know, if it's a player that's not DeMar, it's probably Derrick White running the pick and roll. Mm-hmm. This year, he was fantastic running the pick and roll. I can look up those stats right now, see exactly his point per possession efficiency in the pick and roll. It was really high. It was, I believe, the highest on the Spurs and one of the higher ones in the NBA overall. And Derrick is absolutely one of those players who, you know, his mind for the game is next level. You see it on both ends of the floor. You see it when he takes 5 charges in a game, which has to be some sort of record.
Just remarkable.
You know, he's a really intelligent player, and now we're seeing him play with the confidence of a player as talented and as smart as he is. Knicks, keep dreaming. You didn't get Kevin Durant. You didn't get Kyrie Irving. You didn't get anybody before that, and you won't get the player who is as good, if not better, Derrick White.
Yeah, I don't know what world like that rumor came about, or like I don't know if you're trying to force that narrative, but that it's not happening.
Stop trying to make Derrick White to the Knicks happen. It's not going to happen.
Spurs are never, ever, 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 ever going to do a deal with the Knicks if they can make sure of it. if there is one franchise that the Spurs will detest for the tale of times, it's going to be the New York Knicks. You see the pettiness still with the whole Marcus Morris situation. It still exists.
Yeah.
So, I mean, even when Fizz got fired, Pop couldn't hold back on trying to throw some shade their way. But, again, what you're seeing from Derrick in the bubble is potentially superstar stuff. I mean,
right.
I think we came to a conclusion after my Jeff McNeil reference that, like, Malcolm Brogdon is sort of what we're looking at. And, I think he ended up shooting this season like 37% from three. I think he can work his way up to a 40%. 38?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I think that Derrick should be a 40% three-point
Actually,
shooter.
you're right. It's 37, sorry.
37, yeah. So
38
I
think, in the bubble.
I think Derrick can be a 40% three-point shooter throughout the course of a season, which really would open things up. I mean,
on like 8 to 12 attempts per game, though, too.
Yeah, I mean, like the fact is, when the Spurs consolidate what they have with like pure shooters, having a guy like Derrick is going to be amazing to see. So, man, I just, we can gush about Derrick all we want, but I think he is. Oh, Derrick just missed a yam. Drew. I think Derrick is probably the number one player in my head who's got superstar potential out of the young group. I think he is. If you want to talk about, like, we removed DeMar and LaMarcus and that discussion, like the next potential all-star for the Spurs, I think it's Derrick White.
Yeah. Let's talk about the split between bubble and the regular season. Pre-bubble, overall for the full season, he played 25 minutes a game, 11 points per game, 3 3-point attempts per game. In the bubble, 29 minutes a game, 18 points per game, 8 threes per game at 38%, almost 4 rebounds, 5 assists, and a little over block and steal combined per game. And he was just one of those guys that was all over the floor. So, just this whole season, he's had that skill and that talent and brought, obviously, the defense, but more sneakily, probably, the pick and roll stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And, I mean, man, in the bubble, he's got to be on one of the top 3. Like, if you made an all-bubble 3 teams, he's got to be on one. He's got to be on one of the all-defensive teams.
Yeah,
he's been fantastic.
He's been great. It just, as I said, I mean, he's too easy to talk about. Just know that Derrick White. I think the Spurs need to figure out locking him down, see if you can sign him to the Dejounte Murray extension. I'm sure that if I was Derrick White's agent, I want a little bit more than what the Spurs gave Murray. But regardless, I think get that figured out. He needs to be part of this organization for a long time.
Yeah, absolutely. So now we got 3 guys left that we got to talk about. They are veterans. One of them didn't come to the bubble. One of them played really well in the bubble. And another one played surprisingly really well in the bubble.
Rudolphus.
Yeah, let's start with him. Rudolph Gay. What did you think of his season overall, and then what did you think of what he did in the bubble?
Rudy's season overall is a disappointment, but what he's done in the bubble is exactly what he did the previous season, which is why the Spurs gave him the money he got. This is the Rudy that the Spurs signed up for throughout the entirety of the season. And if they had this Rudy for the entirety of the season, who knows where the Spurs are? They could have picked up, if you thought that second unit was dominant during the season already, imagine having Rudy being at the top of his game. Rudy in the bubble, his usage is at 26%. They're running that entire second unit through him. So that's one thing. But in his bubble games, 19 points, 12 points, 24 points, 24 points, 14 points, 19 points, 13 points. 8 of 15. The Grizzlies game was a mess. He was 3 of 15 shooting, but field goals: 8 of 15, 3 of 15, 9 of 15, 9 of 18, 5 of 9, 5 of 11, 5 of 11. Okay, 3-pointers: 3 of 5, 2 of 6, 2 of 4, 2 of 6, 2 of 3, 2 of 5, 3 of 6. I mean,
yeah, that's 46% for 3 in the bubble. He was just fantastic. It was really quite something to see.
The Rudy we see in the bubble would have made such an impact this year for the Spurs team, and it did. This version of Rudy made such an impact last year for the Spurs when they made it to the playoffs as a 7 seed, and they just didn't get that throughout the entirety of the season. So much so that they had to limit his minutes at times because he was a negative impact. His 3-point shooting just wasn't good enough. It just wasn't. But the stuff that he's done in the bubble makes you excited for at least what he can provide next season. If anything, it also provides trade value if you want to dish him off. Somebody would definitely I would argue you probably need him because you don't have anybody to fill that position. So I think you got to keep him. But at the trade deadline next year, if the year's going south, he's probably a person you can trade away for something. So, second round pick, maybe. So, overall, disappointed. But what we've seen at least gives you reason to believe that he still has another year left in him. And then after that year, I think you probably have to say goodbye.
Yeah, I agree. I think you see what he can do next year. If he can bring this version of himself that's shooting almost 50% on threes, I'll take 40. But that would make up for some of his shortcomings, especially the defensive end of the floor, where I think that was where he and you can justify it if he's
somebody said
a 4 stretching the floor. But
somebody said he's injury prone, and he played 69 games last season. He played 67 games this season. I mean, he's been fairly durable. He missed, and he's not gonna log you more than 70 games, but he hasn't had one of those 30-game seasons in a while.
No, I totally agree. And I think he's been a good veteran for this young group. But yeah, I think his role next year with the team is going to be a smaller one for sure.
Or make it similar to what he's doing this, right? He comes in, he plays he plays in a second unit, and he's the pure shooter of the group, and he's a mismatch for a lot of second units. So
he still gets
got
buckets.
A role. Yeah, he's got a role.
He can put it on the floor and get a bucket. So that's always going to be valuable. That's something he can still do. Yeah, we're talking about Dejounte's decision making, and he just tried to thread a pass between 2 guys who were standing at the elbow, at the elbows, walling off Chimezi, and it was a turnover. He makes some mistakes that is what are you doing? But then again, so do a lot of veterans on the team. So these things happen. So Evan, we're reaching the part of the program where we got to talk about DeMar DeRozan and LaMarcus Aldridge. The thing is, the Spurs game, the one that's going on, is in the fourth quarter now. There's about 9.5 minutes left, and after that, we've got to go talk to Greg Popovich. So should we save the DeMar and LaMarcus conversation for after that?
I think we got enough time to get.
Okay. Well, let's bang it out then. Let's start with the guy who played DeMar DeRozan. He looked fantastic in the bubble, huh?
DeMar DeRozan, the version of DeMar DeRozan that we got in the bubble is a fantastic version. The fact is, you're playing now you're playing 4 perimeter players with Yak. DeMar was handling the ball and driving and collapsing defenses, which allowed him to kick out and find open shooters or have them drive and continue to screw up defenses. He decided to kind of shift his role into like thinking about scoring all the time into more of a, hey, if they don't give it to me, I'm going to find different ways for my teammates to score. And we saw that at points this season, but we didn't see it all the time. And I just think that the version that we got in the bubble where he allows the other players to stay involved and to get their three-point shots up, I think creates more opportunities for more points, more pace. And then just having his presence in the fourth quarter when defenses do lock down and he can just play iso ball and really just torch some weak defenders out there. Like his value as a closer is phenomenal. So I know the knock on him has been his ability to close games during the regular season, but I just think that now if he is, he's somebody that should really have I want him to have 7 to 9 assists a game. He should be leading the team in assists every game.
Yeah.
And he should still also get 20 points or so per game. Because he's just so good at getting to the line, and he's so good with his mid-range. He really he exploits mismatches and poor defensive switches. And again, if we speak about his defense, if you play him with guys like Derrick and Dejounte and Yak, his defense is more than adequate, and it's not going to be a problem anymore. So I don't know if he's going to opt in. Again, we have to see what the salary cap situation is. I would imagine he's still going to opt out. And I think there is an argument to be had that the Spurs should probably deal with DeMar.
So I'm with you on a lot of it. I think the bubble version of him was fantastic. He was one of the best fourth quarter players. I am leaning more toward, in the comment there said, one more year where DeMar can play sort of the role that he's played in this bubble and do what he does, score late, get his teammates involved early, and hope that this young core that the Spurs are putting so much into developing is ready for the next season without DeMar. I think
I'm just a bit. Here's the other thing. I don't think that the only way you're getting one more year of him is if he opts in. To which, whatever, then we suspend this conversation for a year. But if he opts out,
he's not
happening.
About.
Yeah, if he opts out, we're not talking about the year. So I just don't know. Here's the thing, right? Rudy's 36 years old, and he's still getting buckets. I don't see why DeMar can't get buckets for another 4 years. His talents will slowly deteriorate like any person does, but he's always been a staple of health. I just don't see if you surround him with the right personnel, I don't see how he becomes a detriment.
Right. I agree with that. It's just long term. I don't want to see the Spurs invest too much money in a guy who is definitely over the hill in terms of his career. I would much rather see them overpay for retaining their young core. So I think if he does opt in, I would rather the Spurs run it out next year, because I saw somebody ask what could they get in a sign and trade. I don't think very much. I don't think his trade value is super high.
Yeah, I agree. I don't know exactly. I'm sure they can get a piece. Nothing that's going to be transformative.
Whatever piece you get back is not going to be the caliber of player that DeMar DeRozan is. Still.
Exactly. Yes.
And I think if you ride it out with this 1 year, he can still contribute and act as sort of that bridge. So we should talk about LaMarcus now then, yeah.
Yeah, and LaMarcus, and you can pull up his stats and provide that. I'll just speak off of what I remember pre-bubble, and that is LaMarcus was best when he was playing in the perimeter. And if LaMarcus
100%.
is going to be a part of the future for San Antonio, he needs to live as a perimeter player. And you said it before, if he has a mouse in the house, go and enjoy your time. But the days of dumping it down to LaMarcus and having him back down to defender are over. They have to be over. It's just not good basketball anymore. I mean, Rick Carlisle mentioned it with KP when they were like, why don't you have Porzingis in the post? And, Carlisle's like, well, it's not a good basketball play anymore. And it's not. Now, I do agree that, if you have, way undersized, just throw it down there and get the 2 points. Like, I'm not that stubborn. But, oh, cool, Lonnie's about to get hot. He just hit back-to-back threes. So,
oh, nice.
He
heard us talking about how he needs to be more consistent in his outside shot.
Yeah, Lonnie has a little bit of a dog in him in the fourth quarter. He does get in those. He's like he's like in beer pong. You get heating up.
Right. He lives for big moments for sure.
Yeah. But yeah, with LaMarcus, if he lives on the perimeter and that's how he would play with Jakob, is that Jakob can still play that role of getting rebounds in the post, and you can tell LaMarcus, hey, play, use your size to your advantage. He's not going to be great around guarding the perimeter, but you can maybe figure out some sort of defensive system with LaMarcus and Jakob. If you put Dejounte and Derrick up there at top, maybe that means LaMarcus comes off the bench. I don't know. I don't know what that looks like, but all I know is that 7-footers who can hit 3-pointers don't grow off trees. And if he can, kind of transform his game into a Porzingis, Brook Lopez-esque style, he provides value. He does.
Yeah.
If he doesn't want to do that, and I keep seeing him in the post, then I want him gone. It's like he has to make that cognitive decision.
And he did, right? Value, I mean, he did that in the season. It was a very distinct game where he was like, oh, I can just take that extra step back and shoot 3-pointers, and that's cool. He shot – when he started shooting a higher volume, it was December and January, he shot 45% from 3 in those months.
Yeah.
Not nearly as well in February and March. He was dealing with injury. But, he's – I don't think he's too old for his 3-point shot to improve. I mean, he's a born shooter. He's a guy who is one of the most pure shooting big men in the game today.
Mm-hmm.
And if you want to pair some type of big man with a young core that is really, really good at driving and kicking and running pick and roll, you want to do that with the best pick and pop big you can, and LaMarcus Aldridge is that.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's definitely one more year on running him back with DeMar and LaMarcus Aldridge. And I don't think it's either of their faults the way this year went. I think it came down to the players around them. And in the bubble, we've seen what players work well out of this group. So in this last couple minutes here, before we go into this post game, guys, I'm curious to see what you got. Oh, is that Jackson Floyd wants to join in? Hey, Jackson.
You gotta wait 5 seconds to the countdown.
Jackson, are you there?
I'm here. Can you hear me? Am I coming in through?
Oh my gosh, he's here. Yeah.
Long-time listener, first-time caller. Doing great.
Yeah. You've been an especially long-time listener if you've been listening to this whole episode.
Yeah,
you got green.
It's just the luck of the draw there. You guys, loving what you guys are saying and everything you're breaking down here. I just want to say the last 2 weeks is probably the most fun I've had watching the Spurs since the beautiful game Spurs.
Oh, it's been so much fun.
Just running and gunning with the young guys, watching them try to find new ways to do things. The ball movement was great. The 3-point shooting was great. This was fun. I don't know if I would have enjoyed it more if there were no playoff stakes on the line. If we were just watching the development happen without having to worry about percentage points and play-in games. But still, just a blast.
I can tell you, having watched the development in Austin, this is more fun.
Yeah.
And Austin is great fun too, if you ever make it up to a game at the HEB Center up there. And it is really awesome to see these young guys, because I've gotten an opportunity to see a large chunk of this Spurs team play in Austin.
Yeah.
And sort of grow up basketball wise. So it's really like my first thing that I did as a journalist that was journalisty was the NBA draft in 2016 with Dejounte Murray. And so I've sort of been watching this youth movement really closely, and this is the most optimistic I have felt about it in a while, and this is the most we've seen from them, sort of by definition. So it's been really, really cool. With this last 4 minutes or so in the Spurs game, what are some things that you guys want to hear from the players and from Pop about this season? Definitely drop your comments, and if you're nice and smart, we might ask them. But I mean, I think the biggest thing for me, might annoy Pop for a little bit, but I would like to ask him if he has any thoughts looking back in hindsight about the decisions he made with the lineup and the rotation. Just given the early success of Keldon Johnson, and the growth of Derrick White here. Derrick White played more certainly in the regular season, but he wasn't given this role in this green light. So I want to know sort of what his post-mortem is of what happened this season, in terms of his own coaching performance from that respect.
Yeah. And I think I saw someone ask her about Spurs draft. One positive of the Suns going 8-0 was the Spurs actually move up into a position to get the 10th spot now. So that increases their odds to get a top 4 pick, or a top 3 pick, I should say, as the Spurs are kind of falling apart here with their comeback effort. So, we'll do a whole draft sort of breakdown at some point in the future when we get closer to it. Lonnie is doing, I don't know what, in traffic. This team kind of fell apart. But with the draft, we will be able to delve into prospects. I was able to speak with Sam Facini of The Athletic earlier in the pandemic, when the draft was supposed to be closer, and talk about a bunch of prospects. There are some names that are at the top of my list. I know every Spurs fan this side of the Mississippi wants Denny, and I understand those reasons for sure. He's certainly a name which is on the big board. Devin Vassell out of Florida State. I love Killian Hayes, the point guard out of Germany.
We got time for draft stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, I will say with any of those names you just mentioned, it's exciting to know that this young squad is going to be bolstered by one more young guy. That's just
another draft pick.
Yeah.
To expect them to go down to Austin for, like, everyone's like, oh, they should be an impact player next year, and it's like, I don't know. They'll probably head down to Austin, and then they'll make their way up to the big club at some point.
Yeah.
Yeah. If recent history is any indication, the road to meaningful minutes in San Antonio is I-35, and there's traffic. But yeah, with that, I think we'll probably wrap this show up here pretty soon.
Hey, Tom,
I just want to throw it out there that, like, I'm sure we're not going to get a straight answer from Pop, but you wonder how many more seasons he has left.
Yeah.
Right. I don't want to ask him that. I'm going to let somebody else ask him that.
I want to hear from Pop and the players how the conversation continues around systemic racism in the country. This was such a platform for them to speak, and they were forthcoming with their views, their opinions, what they had to say. What's next? You know, they're going to lose that platform. You know, there's going to be less reporters asking them questions now that the season's ending. I'd like to hear how they're going to continue the important conversation they were having throughout this whole bubble run.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a wonderful point. And you know, this is the shot clock buzzer for a lot of those guys. So to ask any. I've certainly got a question for DeMar DeRozan. I asked Pop earlier in the day what he thought about the San Antonio City Council considering a resolution to declare racism a public health crisis. He gave a really interesting answer on that. And DeMar, his focus on mental health, I'd certainly be interested to hear what he has to say about that. So, you know, it's what a season, guys. I mean, certainly none like it before. Hopefully none like it ever again. But what a historic NBA and Spurs season we have just witnessed the end of. It's been crazy, and it's been fun covering it with you two and covering it for all of you out there watching. It's been a lot of fun. Pain. And I think that's the thing that Pop and these guys and Spurs fans are going to be holding on to going into next season. And I'll answer one last question I see in there. Yeah, I think they can make the playoffs next season. They're coming. 22 more years, right?
20. Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll break it again. They need to take a breather. They need to take a swig.
Break it again. 23. Yeah. All right. Well, it's been lovely hanging out with you guys. We're gonna go jump in the shark cage with Pop, but it's been awesome hanging out, sharing our collective pain and collective optimism for the future. Love you guys. We'll see you later. This has been the not so fun, big fun end of the season show, and that's a wrap for 2020, guys. Wish we could say that with non-basketball things.
Hey, we'll be back sooner than you think because of the shifting of schedules. So,
oh yeah, we're not going away in the off season. We'll be here. We'll be putting in work. I want to do a very detailed post-mortem, split the corpse open on some of these awful Spurs losses this year. It wasn't just the Sixers loss.
We didn't even get into that.
Yeah. We've got a whole new show.
You can look.
We didn't get to that in the 3
Twitter
hours or whatever we just did.
We did tweet out our games the Spurs should have won and should have lost. So
right. We'll discuss that at a later point in time.
Yeah. But keep your eyes peeled for the big fun autopsy, right?
Yes. Absolutely.
Oh, there's Dejounte in transition, giving the ball up.
Bring your own bone saw. All right. See you guys.